Well, I think they've been expecting her to travel at some point because there are no restrictions on her movements as there were in the past. 10 years ago or more, when she was released from detention, she was only released conditionally, that she wouldn't leave the downtown area of Rangoon. And it wasn't until 2003 that they actually allowed her to move around the country. This time, she was under a court order, which she served, and when she was released unconditionally. So there are no restrictions on her movements. If the government puts restrictions on it, then they will have to come up with a new excuse for imposing them. There have only been two periods when she moved around the country. One was in 1989 when she was campaigning, helping the NLD campaign. She was not running, but she was helping the NLD organize and campaign for the 1990 elections. But they put her under detention that time, probably because she was stirring people up as she moved around the country. And then again in 2002, 2003, for a year she was allowed to move around, and the large numbers of people who came out, I think, spooked the military government, and they attacked her and created an excuse to put her back in detention. And I certainly don't rule out that scenario. If the crowds turn out to be large and they feel that it's a threat to the stability of their new government, they will create an incident. I'm sure that she will be very careful about security. I think that's the major concern of everybody because of what happened to her last time. But I'm sure she's thought that through. You never really know what's going to happen. The government will be on alert, there's no question about it, and they will probably not be very friendly to her. When she traveled in 2002, 2003, during that 1 year when she was traveling around the country, she actually had a government security escort, and that was a much safer situation than it would be today. I don't think I haven't seen any sign that the government will provide any security services to her. In fact, it may be quite the opposite. I'm sure that she will draw crowds the same way she did before. But it's difficult to predict right now whether the crowds will be as large as they were, whether the government will take measures to control the crowds before they ever gather. It's hard to tell, or whether the fact of elections and elected government will actually serve to reduce people's interest in coming out. We'll see. Everything that happens contributes to a gradual process of change there. No situation is totally static, and I think right now, with a different structure of government in the country, even though you have many of the same faces, albeit without their uniforms, the structures of government are different now, and it's a more complex system of governance than they've had for 20 years. So they are going through more rapid political transition right now than they have for a long time. Even though it's not rapid enough, it's more rapid. So everything contributes to that process. It hasn't had an impact yet on the economy and therefore people's standard of living or quality of life. The government only took office at the end of March and is still finding its way around Naypyidaw. It certainly hasn't markedly improved the human rights situation in the country. It hasn't improved freedoms. It hasn't expanded the freedoms, although for the last few years freedoms have been expanding gradually. And we'll see if that process continues, then eventually we'll be able to say that the transition has expanded the people's freedom. The first problem is the way they ran the elections. If they had allowed the opposition, including the NLD, to run in the elections and arrive at a reasonably representative group of opposition politicians in the parliament and in the government, then I think you'd have a more balanced political situation in the country. And as long as it's so heavily weighted in the direction of military and ex-military control over the country's governance, then I think you're not going to have any dramatic openings in the near future. I think that she's the main voice in the country who understands the responsibilities and what's required for a sustained democratic government. And I think that she's the most powerful watchdog on this government, and I think she will remain a critical figure in the country's political development.